Hello, as we continue our conversations in our opening seminar at AI for Good. So one of the big interesting challenges is how do you find the right kind of AI input, the AI talent, and indeed the AI skills to counter or manage the big challenges that we face, whether it's in the world of cybersecurity, cyber defense, or in general to use AI for the purposes that we would like to. So Linux and the Linux Foundation play an important role here. And I'm pleased to be now joined by Dr. Ibrahim Haddad, who is the Vice President of Strategic Programs at the Linux Foundation, and working with large technology companies and open source projects. He also leads the LF AI and Data Foundation that supports and sustains development and innovation in open source artificial intelligence and data. And this work and the work of LF AI and Data as a whole supports companies, developers, and the open source community in identifying and contributing to AI and data projects that address the challenges of industry. Dr. Hadad used to earlier work with Samsung Electronics as VP of R&D and earlier in Samsung as head of open source divisions. He's also worked in the past, before that, with well-known brands like Ericsson, HP, Motorola, and Palm. And Palm is always an interesting brand to hear about, which has obviously played an important role, but may not be around today. Ibrahim, thank you very much for joining us. So let me start off with a sort of simple question. So tell us about the work that you're doing in the context of AI and some of the examples that you could give us in how your work is intersecting with the world of AI and the challenges or the needs of what we are seeing outside.
Yes, of course. First, thank you very much for having me, and I'm really excited to be having this discussion with you. So my role at the Linux Foundation is two parts. The first one is focusing on bringing in projects and supporting our members. We have over 1,600 members from across the globe that support our mission and want to enable a stronger and more productive and more integrated open source ecosystem. The second part of my role is exclusively focusing on managing and running the LF AI and Data Foundation. So we are a nonprofit organization under the Linux Foundation umbrella. And our goal is to support development and innovation in the open source AI and data space. And that consists of really hundreds of projects coming from thousands of companies with hundreds of thousands of contributing developers. So we focus on bringing in key critical projects in that ecosystem, hosting them in the foundation, providing them with a number of services that helps their developer be more productive, provide services in relation to legal, marketing, event, and many other types of services. And our goal is to make sure that these projects have the support they need so that they can grow their development and they become kind of featured de facto standards in their own specific subcategories. So this is kind of the general work we do, and we work with dozens and really hundreds of companies and projects across the globe.
Right. And tell us about, or if you could perhaps illustrate with some examples of the kind of work that you are doing in the AI space, and both on the need as well as on the supply side.
Sure, thank you. So I think, there are a lot of examples we can draw in, and I think the one that will really make a connection with a lot of people watching this may be the topic of ethical AI. So as you know, there are a lot of AI technologies being infused and integrated in products and services. If you look at our modern infrastructure today, from the movies that are recommended to you on Netflix, or how Google picks what to shows you on your browser, or any of the thousands of examples we can give you, consumers always have the concern about the ethical side. Are the AI technologies I'm using or presented to me, are they fair? Are they trusted? Can we trust them? Is there any bias made into this? And today, there are a lot of these technologies also incorporated in banking and finance and insurance and so on. So when you go to apply for a loan, there's actually an AI algorithm determining if you're eligible for a loan and at what interest and so on. So ethical AI is a really critical topic, and this is very important for us as a foundation. We have a specific committee dedicated to focus on the topic of trusted AI, with dozens of organizations contributing to this effort. We recently published a paper on the repeat principle. We call them basically 8 critical principles that any AI technology must respect to make sure that the end user of the technology has a trusted AI output that they can use without concern on privacy, without concern on security, without concern of anything being manipulated in the process, and making sure that the model or the data that on which the model is presenting the results are trusted, and they're not manipulated in any way, shape, or form. So we have, for instance, on the trusted AI, we have the path focusing on guidelines and principles. And also we back that up with technical work. So we hosted 3 critical projects globally, really, in that domain that address these principles from a practical perspective, meaning, it's great to say that we want models to be fair and we want no bias. But how can you actually prove there is no bias when you're dealing with algorithms that consist of thousands and thousands of lines of code? So we have specific frameworks that are implemented to actually check for these things. So it's really a very exciting topic because there is a lot of need in the space for trusting AI and making sure that really it is what it is. There are kind of no hidden Easter eggs. And at the same time, we're addressing this by providing guidance on the guidelines, on the policies, and also providing projects that actually implements these. So anyone out there can actually download our projects. They're open source, and run them and do this verification on their own as well.
Right, and banking and insurance is a very important example, and there have been some investigations, for instance, which have looked into how banks are configured or have configured their AI algorithms to serve the kind of products that you've talked about. So how does one go deeper into it, and how does one engage with, let's say, a provider in a way that it's not seen as confrontational, and in a way that you're actually seen to be being a solution provider?
Yes. So I will focus more on our side of the equation, what happens in the foundation, but I'm going to give you kind of a very basic example to illustrate the problem. So let's say you have an AI algorithm that determines, for instance, how much insurance coverage you're eligible for. So as a test, you can feed the system the same information about 2 families or the person, say myself, same information, age, income, family size, type of job, everything equal. However, you change only one thing in the equation, which is your zip code or where you live. And then suddenly everything goes wrong in terms of one person gets an insurance coverage at $1 million and the other one gets $100,000. Okay. So why, right? So there has to be a bias built in these algorithms somewhere. So from our perspective as a foundation, we believe a lot of these problems can actually be solved and addressed, but it requires more than just one company to solve them. And this is why you need a trusted environment, a nonprofit organization. So we don't have a product, we don't provide services, we don't support one company versus the other. We are a neutral space where you can think of us as the UN of technology in that sense. A lot of companies come and work together collaboratively under our umbrella to address these different challenges. So typically, if you look at our members, they actually compete in the market space. On a commercial basis, they're competing day in and day out. But when they come into the foundation, they collaborate. And This is really essential because we're dealing with problems that a company on its own cannot solve. It needs that kind of global approach and that collaboration across dozens and hundreds of companies. And since we're talking about ethical AI, I think one really interesting thing that we've done, and I'm sharing this with you, and kind of to show you kind of the nuances, is that when you talk about what's ethical AI, people in North America have a different view on what's right and what's ethical versus people in Europe. And also people in Asia have a different view on ethical AI. And that's really presented and very visible when you look at national policies. So if you look at the US, and you see the national policies and the different mandates and the different support and programs given to AI and ethical AI, they're somewhat different than what China is doing in the space, and of course different than what the EU and the EU Commission is doing in that space. So one of the things we've done is we made sure that we have organizations participating with us from all these different geographies, and even at the level of leadership, we have 3 co-chairs for the committee, one coming from Europe, one from Asia, and one from North America, to make sure that we bring in these different views and we come up with a common denominator across all these different geographies, because our goal is adoption. If we're able to come up with principles and technical projects that test and verify and certify these different principles, but nobody is adopting them, then it's useless work. So what we want to make sure is we have and we capture that common denominator across these different countries, different geographies, so that actually people have buy-in into them and actually adopt them, and the end result is going to be positive for everyone.
Right, and tell us about your work in convincing organizations to be part of this effort, particularly in the Indian subcontinent or India, if you've had the occasion.
Yeah, of course. So actually, Tech Mahindra is an example of a company that's not only participating in LFAI, they were actually a founder, one of the 9 founding companies that created LFAI and data under the foundation. And I think the reasons why company would participate with us and support our mission, or when we approach company, why would they join us, really depends on a company per company basis. And I will get back to you on the Tech M or Tech Mahindra kind of approach, given the location of the event and possibly the interest in Tech M. But generally, companies join us because they see that our mission is something that they feel strong about. They would want to have a strong open source AI ecosystem. They want to have more projects in the ecosystem. They want to have these projects integrated together, and they want to see these projects have an open governance that is not controlled by a single entity. So when projects come to the foundation, we basically, at the foundation, we have admin rights on all the project accounts. We do a transfer of the trademark, so the trademark is never used in any debates or kind of arguments with other companies. We provide all the legal services, and we basically protect the project, and we run it regardless whether the founders of the company are with the projects anymore or not. So the project will continue, and we are, kind of the custodians of the project. Other companies join us because they want to host projects with us. They have this project, and this is an example of Tech M, where they collaborated with AT&T, mobile operator in the US, on a project called Acumus. And they decided that, hey, this project Acumus, is a great innovation and technology, but we would like to make it open source and make it part of that technology ecosystem and bring other players to it and grow its developer impact and development community. So they brought in the project into the foundation, they hosted with us, and today we have at least around 12 to 15 different organizations that are actively contributing to Acumus, and we have a steering committee that represents the different participants. And today, Tech M or Tech Mahindra or AT&T are just one company out of many that decide on the project. So it becomes kind of a truly open source project. And other companies, they use our technologies in their offerings, products, and services, and they want to make sure that these projects continue to exist and have the essential funding they need to operate, to serve their infrastructure and the various elements they need to succeed. So they join us to support the funding of these projects. So companies, really, if you are in the domain of AI and data, open source AI and data, and you're invested in using these projects or contributing to these projects, it's really a very easy decision for you to decide, hey, I want to join LFAI and data and support that mission. And joining the foundation, we have different tiers of membership. So it starts at $5,000 per year. So it's not meant as a way to make it hard for companies to join. I personally, although this is kind of counterintuitive, of course, I would love companies to join in and fund and support us with $100,000 per year. But I'm equally happy to see companies joining, even if it was at 5,000 per year, because that shows will, that shows intent, and it helps us kind of grow our community regardless of how much they're able to contribute to our foundation.
Right. And, if I were to ask you to say that, as you look ahead, let's say if you look at 2022, what would be the 2 or 3 big AI challenges that you would work on? And I think you already touched upon some of them in the context of ethical AI, in the context of, let's say, a consumer service like Netflix, or a banking service, or a financial services industry broadly. But as you look ahead, what are you seeing?
So this looks like an interview during New Year, because around New Year people do predictions. So there are a lot of challenges. Some of them, actually, the most category of challenges are not something you would solve in a year.
Yeah.
I mean, there are challenges that have been going for many years and will continue to go. So looking into 2022 and beyond, I mean, for the next few years, of course, the trusted AI issue is a major issue, and it's not going to be solved in a year or two. That's kind of an ongoing and repeating pattern for the next few years. There's a new domain, I mean, not as new, but ML ops. That's been known to be kind of a challenge. A lot of efforts are being established to address the tooling for the end-to-end workflow and make it integrated in the developer operation and so on. But there's kind of a fork of that, if you wish, that we call data ops. And we recently launched a committee that addresses this, with basically similar to ML ops, but focused on the data aspect. So we need to have tools for the manipulation of data, for tagging data, for addressing the privacy and security in relation to data, and integrating all of that within the developer workflow. Other challenges would be in relation to computing power. So the more powerful our hardware gets, the more power we need. So this is like feeding the dragon. It's never ending. So having access to additional computing power is kind of an ongoing theme. Other challenges are related to data. For instance, the more data you have, the less obvious it becomes. How am I going to derive specific insights from this insane amount of data that will help me improve my business? So for instance, we're talking to mobile operators who have 300 million subscribers. Some of them have over 1 billion subscribers. And of course, you can extrapolate from in which country a mobile operator can have 1 billion plus subscriber. But basically, these companies are collecting data in the terabytes, every millisecond. So you have this vast amount of data. And the challenge is, how do we derive insights that will help us improve our operation, improve our customer service, improve our network configuration, et cetera, et cetera. And one challenge that you touched upon and in the opening of your statement was in relation to hiring talent. So today, you have this booming sector of AI, machine learning, and there is really a war that is happening every day, 24 hours a day, which is talent war. Companies competing against each other to attract talent specific to this domain. And this is kind of an invitation for everyone listening to this call. If you're a student, if you're a graduate student, have a look at this domain, because the hiring potentials are really incredible. So there are really a lot of challenges, as and we can go on, but these are kind of the ones that come to mind. And a lot of them will require kind of a multi-year effort to get to a point where you can say that we address that issue or that challenge, or we're on the verge of resolving it.
Right. And I'm going to come to one of my last questions on AI governance and creating structures for AI governance. But before that, our work is in the area of fighting misinformation, and we work with technology platforms or social technology platforms to do that. What's your sense about the work that's going on there, and what could we do better using the skills or the work that's already going on at your foundation?
Yes, thank you. That's a very interesting question because it touches on current events in a way that's that's happening. So in a very transparent way, I have no idea what's going on there because a lot of these efforts, not a lot, actually, all of them are proprietary. Meaning if you look at social media companies, we have no idea how they're fighting misinformation. I mean, they say and they claim, they are doing a lot of efforts in the space, but we as non-employees of these different organizations, we have no visibility into how they're doing this. And this is really an open invitation to any organization engaging in such an effort that, it would be really a good idea to consider doing this effort in a much more transparent and open source way, because then you gain a lot more credibility. And then at the same time, you will collect a lot of feedback and have the support of a lot of smart people that can help you do that. So think of it, can any company out there go and hire all the smart people within any given domain, even if you're like the Apple or the Google or the Amazon or, and you're $1 trillion company, you cannot go and hire all the smart people that will help you solve a given problem. So what's the best way to tap into that collective intelligence and to access the skills of these different people that are not working for you in your company? The best way to do that is via open source. Establish open source practices, establish open source projects that address that specific topic, and then gather industry around you to help you solve it. Because this is not just a single company problem. This is really a problem at a global scale, and not a single company can address it on its own. So for instance, since we're talking social media, of course, Facebook comes to mind, Twitter comes to mind. So why not, and many other platforms as well, they're not as popular or as large as these main two, but it would be really interesting if there is an effort led by social media companies, an open source effort to address this topic using an implementation of various AI algorithms that is open source. And then you'll be able to tap into the massive resources available globally. And of course, in the process, gain credibility that you're actually very sincere in resolving this issue in a very open and transparent way. So from our perspective, as a foundation, we host 34 different projects that are focused on different aspects of AI from end to end. And these projects are run under an open governance. Everything is open about our project, not just the code, all the meetings, all the mailing lists, the interactions, everything about the project is open, and these projects can provide building blocks. So you can think of when you're building a solution for any given problem, you think of, for instance, Legos. You need these different pieces of solutions that you integrate together, and then you have a solution to a given problem. So we are providing different building blocks for different possible solutions that exist. So if you need the training framework, we have that. If you need the machine learning platform, we already have that as an open project. If you need specific project to address the topic of bias in models and data, or to address the issue of trust in AI, we have different technological project that can be implemented as part of your solution. If you're looking for any type of domain technology, if you would like to track lineage of data, where these different data sets are coming from, what changes happen to them, by whom at any given stage, we have a project that helps you solve that. So we provide these different technology building blocks that companies can come in and use them and integrate them in their solutions. And this is kind of part of what we do in helping address and making technology available, technology that is neutral, hosted in a nonprofit organization without a commercial purpose, with commercial or profit seeking outcome.
Right. And that's very useful to know. So, which in a way brings me to my next question. So, organizations who start in collecting data, interacting with consumers, and and grow, how do they build a AI governance network or a AI governance approach? As they start out, and as you know, before you know it, you've already reached 100 million consumers, you've collected terabytes of data, and sometimes all of that happening every second, as you just pointed out.
Yes. So this is a very interesting issue because it's not kind of a company level only, meaning, even if you look at governments, there are countries across the globe, and last time I checked, there were about 45 countries globally out of about 180 or so that have national policies specifically related to this topic. And even some countries have established positions within the government for officials that foresee this. In addition, there are in some countries there are ministers of AI, and they're focusing on this topic. And then, of course, you go from kind of the national level to the province or to the state level, and then, of course, at a private level, meaning companies. So a lot of companies today, similar to governments, they collect data and they're sitting on really insane amount of data that is being incremented by the second. And for that, they typically have different policies in place within the company, and they've possibly implemented or they are using open source tooling to manage the data, to tag the data, to sort it, to anonymize it, because obviously there are a lot of personal information, whether it's your medical records, whether it's your cell phone information, because it's not just who you call, it's just the text you get, your location as you move with your phone, the different apps, the data collected by the apps. And then suddenly, if you take 30 seconds to think of the different interactions you have with your phone, all of these interactions have footprints. And these footprints are basically data points that are being collected and stored somewhere. And what we're calling for really is a lot of transparency and the adoption of the open source methodology and open source tooling, especially when it comes to privacy and security. And if you look 20 years ago, when the telecom industry was being disrupted by open source, a lot of the kind of reactions were, we are kind of a special industry, we have a lot of regulations, and we cannot just adopt open source. There are a lot of requirements, et cetera, technological requirements, non-technological requirements. And then fast forward 20 years today, all of the telecom infrastructures across the globe are actually running on Linux and open source networks, different technologies, right? And the same thing applies to even today. If you look at the finance industry, which is highly regulated industry, it's being disrupted by open source. And there are even, we host a foundation that actually specifically address that thing. Automotive, the automobile industries, same thing. So there are nothing really special about anybody or any specific industry. And what has proven is that the open source approach actually works. It has worked 20 years ago for many industries. It's worked 5 years ago for finance plus industry. It worked for the automotive industry. Today, when you go and you drive a Tesla, it's being powered by many open source technologies being embedded in it. So to go to your question, a lot of these companies are collecting data, and I think having officers involved in the organization overseeing what's going on within the company is a great step. Having policies to govern the aspect of data is great, but then also you have the aspect of tooling and to manipulate and use this data, and also you have the aspect of sharing. So imagine if you are a hospital and you do 50,000 scans per year for lung cancer, or for any kind, any type of specific disease that as a humanity we're trying to solve. How useful would it be if you take these different information, about the X-rays you've done or the MRIs you've done, and associate them with a positive or negative result and make them available so that doctors in other countries, when they come across something similar, they create a correlation that this may be leading to cancer, or this is stage 1 or stage 2 and so see, or stage 3, and multiply that by the millions of hospitals we have across the globe. So that type of data is extremely important, and the challenges around it is sharing it, and for that we actually at the Linux Foundation we resolve the challenge of licensing. So we have created what we call the CDLA version 2 today license, which is specific license that is dedicated to sharing data. And the second aspect of it is all the tools that make sure that there's no personal information and that the transaction of data from one source to another is kind of secure. So from a commercial perspective, companies are doing a lot of efforts, as I mentioned, but what I would urge them to do is consider an open approach to solving a lot of these issues they come across. And I'm sorry, I took a long time to answer, but this is really an important topic. So thank you for giving me time to.
Right. No, thank you so much. I think, the arc from Tesla on one end to sharing medical records or data on medicine so that people can actually benefit and lives could be saved is really indeed a fascinating one, and sort of I think sums up the conversation very beautifully. On that note, it's been a pleasure speaking to you, and thank you so much for joining me, Dr. Ibrahim Haddad, Vice President of Strategic Programs at the Linux Foundation, also leading the LF AI and Data Foundation that supports and sustains development and innovation in open source artificial intelligence and data. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thanks for the staff that are in the background helping us with this. All the best.
Our pleasure. Thank you.